The cost of college has certainly exploded.
Student debt has tripled in less than 15 years. In the US alone, student debt has reached $1.7 trillion. Globally, college tuition is on the rise. And the messages we hear about whether or not we need college to succeed are more mixed than ever. So, is college worth it in 2022?
Higher education institutions need to do much better.
All of a sudden, are people questioning whether or not college is worth it?
Colleges are basically for fun, but they're not for learning.
Okay, let's look at the literature and see what the data says. In addition to looking at the literature and analyzing data, I've interviewed two professionals in the field for this video. Dr. Gail Mellow is the former president of LaGuardia Community College and is based in New York. And Dr. Ariane de Gayardon, who is a researcher at the Center for Higher Education Policy Studies and is based in the Netherlands. It all started with a shift in higher education financing. Governments around the world have been and still are major players in the higher ed scheme. But as time went on, the cost of higher education per student rose, and so did the number of students attending, which made it difficult for governments to solely finance higher education.
As fewer and fewer and fewer tax dollars every year go into higher education, go into colleges, those colleges, to keep open, have raised their prices.
Cost sharing is a term used to define the shift in at least part of the higher education cost burden from governments or taxpayers to parents and students. Cost sharing is a worldwide phenomenon. It is detected even in Europe, where the shift is comparatively the slowest and least detectable.
That's what happened when they are effectively when you are introducing tuition fees or even increasing tuition fee. All of that is cost sharing. So the trend has been to push the cost of higher education towards students. At the same time, the realization that, the government can shoulder all of the cost, the students can shoulder more and more and ever more of the cost. And then maybe you need to think about diversifying costs, so trying to find that mysterious third party that could give some money to higher education.
Now, the issue that many people express concern over is the belief that people's higher education is not paying off. Many people feel like they graduate with debt and still struggle to find work. In fact, in the US, 71% of students who graduate from a 4-year college are indeed indebted. And in England, reforms in higher education financing in the past 20 years have led to more undergraduate students borrowing, as well as borrowing larger sums compared to previous years. On average, it takes graduates years to pay back their debt, depending on how much debt they have. And on top of all this, many believe that bachelor's degrees are increasingly becoming worthless because there are so many people graduating with them. In 1970, only 26% of workers in the middle class had studied beyond high school. But currently, over 60% of jobs in the US require a college degree. This is sometimes referred to as academic inflation.
Only the top 5% of people in the United States went to college, and a college degree was not at all essential for maintaining your family, getting a job that allowed you to maintain your family.
Okay, so based on these facts, there's a strong narrative that a college education is not only worthless today, but also puts people in so much debt that they have to worry about paying back for the majority of the rest of their lives. But does this narrative fully reflect the reality of the situation?
One of the things that is often true is that the narrative is constructed in a way that really leads to one kind of conclusion. But when you look at the evidence, the data behind that, you have a very, very, very different sense of what's going on. So I'd say that when we look backwards from what happens to individuals who complete and there are levels, right, of post-secondary education, a certificate after a high school, a community college degree, a 4-year college degree, a graduate degree. Each one of those is still and has been for decades connected to increases in socioeconomic status. So the trajectory is very clear.
Most studies that have investigated this topic have found that on the long run, those with college degrees make more money in their lifetime than those without. But how much money you will make does not even cover the whole reality.
The debate is too much about economic issues, and we forget all the social benefits of higher education, and they are huge. There is so much more in terms of the way you're going to live your life, your quality of life, your well-being going forwards, how you're going to educate your children. Higher education institutions need to do much better at recognizing all the benefits and publicizing all the benefits for society and for students.
So then, where is this narrative coming from? Dr. Mellow seemed to have an interesting take on this question.
So you wonder why all of a sudden are people questioning whether or not college is worth it? And I would argue that wasn't an accident, that feeds a particular kind of analysis that really makes people undereducated and therefore less able to take action in their own lives.
And what about the debt crisis?
So I see the debt crisis as being a straw dog, if you will. It is not what is happening. And yet you feel that individually if you're a college student or a parent who doesn't have enough money. It's hard to look at the big picture.
It helps to look into who bears a large part of the debt. While there are certainly people who are negatively impacted by student loans, the reality of the situation is that most people without professional degrees, such as medical or law degrees, bear a doable amount of debt. Those with professional degrees bear a larger amount of debt, usually knowing that they will likely be perfectly able to pay it back. In the United States, another big portion of student debt is owed to for-profit institutions.
For-profit colleges have had extraordinarily market-driven activities, and I have to admit, they've been really good at it. They didn't care about quality, they didn't care about outcomes, they cared a lot about marketing, they cared a lot about maximizing the public support. So all of your loans and all of your funding through Pell Grants are the most common federal financial aid. They have been exquisite at that, and they have derived multi-million-dollar companies out of that. I always said it as I did a debate on public TV once with the head of a for-profit college called DeVry. And I told the man who was organizing this, I said, you probably don't want me because as a community college president, I clearly have not maximized my income because I'm making about $200,000, but the man I'm going to debate is making about $1.7 million. And so looking at that as being a huge proportion of the debt burden in the United States, those numbers that we add up and talk about so big, it's been going to profitable companies who, as you probably know, Araz, in the United States, have also they were not able to keep their accreditation. They have been closed. The federal government now has to pay back students who owe them thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars again. So that's a big piece.
I found this photo online and I wanted to get your reaction.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think it really depends on the context and where you're at with your student loans. I mean, you can say whatever you want about student loans, but a lot of students wouldn't have been able to go to higher education without the loans. And so they wouldn't be where they are in their life and where they are in their professional and probably private lives without them. At the same time, when they become too much of a burden and they impact you consistently throughout your life and delay stuff like buying a house, having children, impact whether you're going to go in further studies or etc., then that's where you must draw a line, because you shouldn't be impacting a whole generation based on a choice they made when they were 18.
So yes, in some countries, college is expensive. And while it's true that
Gates is a pretty smart guy. He dropped out. Jobs, pretty smart, he dropped out. Larry Ellison, smart guy, he dropped out.
These are only a few examples. What that means is that statistically and logically, based on what we know about the world, not everyone can be the exception. But not to be discouraged, because at least in some societies, while not everyone can make it, anyone can make it. Whether college will be a good investment for you is dependent on what you want to do with your life. For most people who do not yet have a clear trajectory, colleges have proven to be helpful in educating young individuals to make better and more informed decisions. Some people choose to skip college and it works out great for them. But as the data shows, up until today, most of those who skip college are not doing better than those who completed it. And the remaining few, the exceptions, are people who had revolutionary ideas and the means to execute them, in many cases, while they were actually still in college. So, since the cost of college and student loans seem to be a big part of the argument against college, will free tuition be the answer? Click on the next video to find out whether free tuition actually works. And if you want to see more of my interview with Dr. Gail Mellow, also click somewhere on the screen. Thank you for watching.